What's going on, boys? It is day number 37 of reading through the book of Isaiah. Today, we're going to be looking at a very interesting passage that kind of transitions from what we were covering yesterday. So, yesterday we were introduced to two very important characters, the king of Assyria, King Sennacherib, and then also the king of Judah by a man named Hezekiah. So many of us have probably heard of Hezekiah, and some of us might have heard of Hezekiah's prayer. We're actually going to cover that here in just a few minutes. But first, I kind of want to talk about the response that Hezekiah gives after we heard what would happen yesterday. So yesterday we ended off by being told that the king of Assyria was like, don't listen to Hezekiah, he's a liar. God can't really deliver you from your troubles. He can't really deliver on his people, on your behalf. And the last thing that we talked about yesterday, verse 21, yesterday we were talking about the people remained silent because they were told not to listen to him. And so this is kind of Hezekiah coming in and we're making a response. And I think he does a really great job, on kind of, being dominant, but not like a dictator almost to the point. So I want to read just verse 4 here and kind of elaborate on my initial thoughts. So it says, it may be that the Lord your God will hear the words of the field commander whom his master, the king of Assyria, has sent to ridicule the living God, and that he will rebuke him for the words the Lord your God has heard. Therefore pray for the remnant that still survives. So only God can decide on what happens to the outcome of someone's life. So you may pray for somebody and pray for them to be compelled, to be compassionate, and there's also the opposite. So, there's someone in your life that is really just being, just not a great supporter to you and is not willing to, agree with terms on you, and it's just in a really dark spot. And while they say that, you have the ability to change someone's life, it ultimately comes down to how God is really going to, work his magic almost. The one way that I think of it is that, the only way someone changes isn't by us continually saying, hey, do this, do this, do this, because they're just going to continuously say no, and it's going to get repetitive over time. Only by you praying to God, saying, God, I pray that this person would hear your word about what is going on in a particular movement or a particular group or a relationship. And that's when things can start happening, because that's when God will reveal himself to that person and be like, hey, like, this is where you're at right now. Like, you want to be here, but you're not on track to be there right now. Like, if you want to be there, you got to, start making some changes here. And there's two words that I want to kind of look at real quick that really kind of caught my attention. The first one is the word ridicule. Now, immediately when I thought of the word ridicule, I thought of the word just kind of curse. It says, sent to ridicule the living God. And I think of it as a word meaning saying, it's false. Like, if you're going to ridicule God, you are saying that his commands are false, that he's a liar, and that, he's not going to deliver on his behalf. It's not true that he's really going to listen and follow on what you're doing. And I think it's really great what it says afterwards, and it uses the word remnant. Now, remnant, I intentionally thought it meant the word enemy, but it does not, actually. I actually did a little Google research and found out that the word remnant means a small group of people who continue to remain faithful to God even in times of despair, of tragedy, and where the majority of people have gone astray. So the one thing I wrote down is that pray for those who continue to follow even when most have gone astray. So we have to remember that, the world is constantly a crazy place. There's people going crazy. There's wars all over the place. People are just constantly batting heads at each other saying, no, this way has to be this way. And it's just never a thing to where people can come to an agreement. But we have to remember that, we live in a certain time of the world where we have to make a choice on how to live, a choice on who we want to hang out with, a choice on what we eat, what we drink, where we want to go. And those choices affect the way we go through life. And it affects on who we meet, how successful we are, and really what we get to do. And that's where we have to be like, okay, who is my center of attention here? Who am I really going to place at the center of my life that I can rely on and be like, I really want to place this at the center of my life and be fruitful in what I do. Um, and it's a hard time because a lot of people in this world are really just, corrupt by all sorts of idolatry and just things that are just not true. Um, so this brings me to one of probably the most important things, probably of this whole book of Isaiah. It's Hezekiah's prayer. Now, I have heard of Hezekiah's prayer before, but I didn't realize how deep it really was until I read it. So I'm going to read. I'm going to start at verse 16 and read through verse 20. So if you want to follow along with me, by all means, go ahead. So it says, Hezekiah says, Lord, the God of Israel, enthroned between cherubim, you alone are God over all the kingdoms of the earth. You have made heaven and earth. Give ear, Lord, and hear. Open your eyes, Lord, and see. Listen to all the words Sennacherib has sent to ridicule the living God. It is true, Lord, that the Assyrian kings have laid waste all these peoples and their lands. They have thrown their gods into the fire and destroyed them. For they were not gods, but only wood and stone, fashioned by human hands. Now, Lord, our God, deliver us from his hand, so that all the kingdoms of the earth may know that you, Lord, are the only God. So, he's praying for his enemy. He's praying for the person who is trying to overrule his kingdom. And the question here is that, can we do the same? Can we pray for someone who is trying to destroy us, trying to make us be deceived? And I think even asking myself that question, I don't even know if I could give an answer, because it's hard. Because you really have to be like, okay, like, how much am I willing to put my faith in God? If I put my faith in God so much that I pray for my enemies and I don't even worry about what they do to me, like, that's a tough thing. And that's a really big thing that I think all of us wrestle through, regardless of our current journey with God. And I think one of the things that Hezekiah does very well here is he tells God directly what is going on and exactly what he is requesting. He's saying, hey, like, this is what's going on. This king has been saying all these things to you. He's ridiculing the living God. I pray that you would deliver us from these terrible things that are going on, and you would reveal yourself to him and make him understand that there's a lot more to you than what we all expected. And sometimes we have to, look twice at something. You have to willing to say, I missed that. And I think Sennacherib is corrupt, and he's ruled by all of these, things that are not from God, these things made by man, because they think, oh, well, I have a better way of living life, and I'm going to follow this way. And I think one of the best ways to look at this, especially when praying for our enemies, is that be a spark that lights the fire. In other words, when you pray for your enemies, don't just say, Lord, I pray for so-and-so. Or, Lord, I pray that so-and-so would fix their attitude. No. Say, Lord, I pray that so-and-so's heart would be thawed by your love and your compassion just as much as you have done it for me. Because I was once in that position to where I threw cursing at you. I didn't believe in what you would do. I couldn't wrap my head around it. It's really something deep you have to think about. And I've even been in those situations before to where I found myself just saying things, and I'm thinking to myself, like, I was in that position before. Like, how cruel is it to me to say that when yet I was in the same position? You have to remember that we're all God's children. We all sin. We all fall short. That's just how life is. There's nothing we can really do about it. The sin is never going to go away while we live on this planet. But what we can realize is that we don't have to live life alone. We don't have to live life wondering about tomorrow. We don't have to live life thinking, oh, well, it's just a sin. It's just go away. Like, no. We can understand how things work. We can understand how the world really does work. And we can put that into practice. We live out what God is telling us to do, not just listen to him. There's a long a word that is given, not word, but a message that is given that concerns Sennacherib. And this is what God was saying to him. And I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I do want to read a little script from verse 27 that I think kind of defines a lot of us who idolize things that don't really benefit us. Verse 27 says, "Their people, drained of power, are dismayed and put to shame. They are like plants in the field, like tender green shoots, like grass sprouting on the roof, scorched before it grows up." So I love the simile that he makes. I think, the whole idea of using this figurative language, throughout the whole Bible is just a really great job. I mean, it's something that, you get taught in school, but then when you hear it in the Bible, you think, oh, that makes really good sense. Like, that's a really good way of combining those words together. But I love that last part where it says, like grass sprouting on the roof, scorched before it grows up. So this kind of makes me think of a time where I had to go up on my roof one time to clean some gutters and to really just examine the roof. Sounds kind of weird. But as we know that if you've ever been in this situation before, when you're on the roof, I mean, number one, you got to be very careful because you're on a slanted surface and you take one wrong step and you're going to fall. But what you also realize is that there's nothing up there. It's just shingles. There's nothing that grows up there. And why, you may ask? Well, because there's no really good foundation for something to grow up there. Grass can't grow up there because there's no soil up there, even though it may be in the gutter sometimes. But you talk about on the top of a house, you're not going to find it. The sun is a constant beating on the house. It is hot up there, and it is just not a great place to live. And that's where these people are around. They can't grow, they can't thrive because they don't have a foundation and they don't have a way out, because this king is leading them astray and is deceiving them, saying that God is not faithful and will not deliver, when in fact he does and he will deliver. And this king is very well corrupted minded by this. And this brings me to my last verse that I think is a very great way of looking at how this defense comes into all of our lives, not just cities that we're at this current time. And it's verse 35. It says, "I will defend this city and save it, for my sake and for the sake of David my servant." So this is God saying, look, I am the ultimate defender of your life. My job is not to corrupt your life. My job is to love you and defend you from the evil ways of this world, because you can't do it on your own. As much as you may think you're very powerful, all the money you may have, all the people you may know, you can't defend yourself. You can't. You can't run away from evilness by yourself. That would be like running on ice. You can't you can't go nowhere. You're running in place. That's what happens when you try to fight evil. You're running in place. Whereas when you're with God, you're able to take off like a track star and really understand that God is the ultimate defender. Think of it like this. For those who watch football, you think of a quarterback and the people on the line. And what is the job of the people who are on the line? The offensive line. Their job is to block and protect the quarterback so he can deliver the ball to where it needs to go. God is our offensive line. We delivered something and we're sitting there. We're like, okay, what do I do with it? God is blocking us, giving us time to make a decision. And we may throw it and throw an interception, or we can throw for the end zone. Take a shot downfield, that's what they say. And I do believe that God wants us to take many shots downfield. And while they all may not work, one will work. Good old Hail Mary. And that is today's word. I hope that you guys have had a great week. Hope you guys have a great July 4th. Stay safe. I will see you very soon. Peace out, boys.